Hello everyone and welcome to Double Bits Workshop. I'm going to kind of take a break here for a second from some of the projects I've been working on and do a review video. The item in question that I will be reviewing today is the 2 horsepower dust collector from Harbor Freight. I've actually had it now for almost exactly 2 years, and I was given this one. I'll be upfront about that. I was looking at making the plunge and the purchase, and I had seen one kind of here and there and kind of thought about picking them up and ended up not doing so. And if I remember right, it was either my wife or myself, I can't remember exactly, I think it might have been my wife, had found on the Western Slope Classified Ads, or it was, I think, on Marketplace, she had found a dust collector for free of all things. And I was like, great, is it broken, is it damaged, yada yada. Well, I had messaged and commented on the posting to the individual who owned it, saying that if available, I will definitely take it. Oddly enough, there was a mild, almost kind of bidding war for a second over this free item. And luckily, the individual that was selling it, or giving away for free, contacted me and said that he had no interest in going through the whole bidding war thing and back and forth. He's like, you asked for it, it's yours. Here's my address, come and get it when you're available. So I was at work, contacted him, thanked him up, down, left, and right, said I will be there at this time. Went and picked it up. Actually ended up having a beer with the individual. He actually runs a shop called Anvil Rings. Really awesome work. I really do like him. He's a very cool individual as well. I won't name him just in case he doesn't quite want his name out there, but if you're watching this, thank you again. The dust collector is doing amazing. I did want to say that it is still running 100%. After 2 years, I've had no hiccups with it, but we'll get to that here in a quick second. I'll kind of tilt you up a little bit so you're seeing exactly the dust collector, which you can kind of see hinting at up here in pretty much all of my videos. So we'll do that real quick. Alright, so I'll be kind of a floating head here a little bit, but I'm going to be talking about the 2 horsepower dust collector right here. So as you can see, it is not in its appropriate configuration as to how you purchase it. So when you purchase it, you get everything you see here, except the hose itself. You would get a connecting hose, which is a 5-inch, this hose. So this is the connecting hose. It's 5 inches on either end of it. And this would technically connect the motor itself over to the Cyclone type separator, and originally it would be in this configuration. So I've seen all sorts of different modification videos, as we probably all have, or at least quite a few of us, and you yourself might have seen a few before even looking and clicking on this video. This is one of the easiest to get your hands on dust collectors out there for a very reasonable price. This is usually around 200 bucks. Currently, as this video is being created, I looked it up, it's $209.99 for this unit here. Now, what you get with that is you actually have your Cyclone separator, you have your dust filter bag that filters down to 5 microns. So that's, to give you an idea, it's 1/10 of a human hair. So it's a pretty darn good filter. It's a cloth filter, just basic one. There are upgrades you can get for that, but I haven't done that because the unit itself is around 200. The filter alone is around 180 to 210 as well. So you're basically buying the dust collector twice to get a really awesome filter, but just keep that in mind, they are pricey. And there's a couple of different brands out there. I think there's 3 or 4 primary brands, and you can get some off brands as well for that off of good old eBay. This also does come with a 2-parter. It ends up giving the ability to have 2 separate inputs, essentially, going into the centralized main input, which is 5 inches. The 2 that you see out here are 4 inches, and you can use 4-inch flex pipe. This kit was actually with it when I got it from the individual. We'll just continue calling him Anvil Rings. He had purchased the $65 kit, or $64.97 is what it is currently, and it comes with some blast gates. So it comes with an additional hose, and it comes with a couple of these little blast gates right here. Now this gives you the ability that as you add and subtract and have different setups and configurations, you can open and allow suction to go through whatever your tool you're working with, or if you have this hooked up to a couple of different attachments you can get from Rockler that have it to where you have a little sweeping buddy, I think they call it. Basically a wide V that you can mount up on the ground, so as you're sweeping you can turn your dust collector on and it would just suck up anything that you're dusting off the floor of your shop. Very neat. I've looked at it and contemplated about it, but I haven't seen this shop getting a configuration that make that work too well. I currently have it set up to just have one long hose. I have an adapter that came with my Bauer planer, and I use that for pretty much everything. It reduces it down to where this can work with my chop saw and a couple other things. The chop saw is a little loose. Technically it's supposed to be a little bit smaller for the chop saw, but a couple of the table saws and different stuff will use this size here. So the adapter goes from a 4-inch down to a 2-inch right here. So anything that you reuse is a 2-inch. If you have the Bauer and you have this nice little adapter here, you can utilize that as well. Otherwise, the purchase of this adapter is 19 something, so around $20 if you were to purchase just a generic one of these adapters. Sometimes you can find them a little cheaper, around like 12 to 15. So if you do require that adapter, just keep in mind it is an additional cost. You get various hose clamps as well, so that way you can attach and get everything properly set up. It does come with a plastic adapter, because on the motor itself is just a rectangle opening, and then you have an adapter that drops it down into a spherical or just circle 5-inch connector for the hose to go over, like I said, from the motor to the separator. And it does come with a couple of bags. This of course is just a normal yard waste trash bag, and those are what I've been using. They work great. I'll double them up a lot of times because I've had, I think, one bag tear on me, but I had overfilled it to the max. So it works great, but just keep that in mind. You can get smaller bags for it if you want to shorten its profile a little bit. I just use a normal bag on here, so it makes it a 70-gallon. However many gallons of what bag you put on there is kind of the capacity that this can go, because that motor doesn't really know when that's full, so you can just keep going with it. I put it in this configuration because a few of the different things I was looking at, I wanted to eliminate my footprint in the shop for it. This configuration worked the best to put it up in the rafters and give me as much space underneath as I could. I originally had it off to the side over here in the shop, but it just took up so much space and it got kind of tedious to hook it up or wheel it around. It has 4 locking casters it comes with, which are awesome in a scenario that you have a larger space to move it around and utilize it. Or if you were to utilize it outside or inside or wherever you needed to move it for, if you're working in the garage or if you're doing a home renovation, the wheels worked great then. But for the shop and just how small it was, I had to put it up in the rafters. I have a lot more rafter space because of how I designed and created the shop to give me that extra kind of area to expand into for lumber and what have you. So that's where this kind of ended up becoming the place that I put it. And I've been really happy with it. This wasn't actually fully in use until a little bit later on. If you look through my videos, I had it kind of off to the side and used it intermittently. When I got the planer, that's when this woke up amazingly for me. I just use this thing non-stop, and I do vacuum my entire shop with it on the longer hose attached to the blast gate, so I can get pretty much my entire shop with this guy here, and it has more than enough power to go through the whole process of getting under and around everything. If it's a little quick minor shop cleanup, I'll use my shop vac underneath my Craftsman that I got from my brother, but otherwise, by and large, this thing pretty much does most of my cleanup as soon as I'm done working with whatever material I'm working with or whatever project I'm just kind of cleaning up in between, or at the very end, this guy gets pulled out. And I would like to eventually get it hooked up to a lot more things. It's just I ran one line pretty much over and just straight down, made it simple. I want to extend that, but I'm trying to see how much real estate I'm willing to give up in my small shop. For a little while, they're actually contemplating about taking the whole unit and mounting an exterior box outside of my wood shop and then just running line outside the shop and into it. But then I thought that would look kind of odd. I could try to go for more steampunk look on it, but by and large I thought it would wear out the unit being outside in the elements or in a small box, kind of just overheating in the summer and then being out in the freezing cold as I'm trying to turn it on and use it. Quick thing on that as well for using this unit if you're looking at purchasing it. Like I said, I've had this for 2 years. The first and foremost thing I had to do, that is a great suggestion to anyone else, is I had to change out my breaker in the breaker box from a 15 amp to a 20, because this can run on 15 amps, but at its peak when you first turn it on, let's give you a quick example of that. So not only did you hear a draw on the power, you probably saw it in my light as well. When it peaks, it hits right at 15 or just slightly over on the amperage rating. It ends up being that what happens a great deal of the time is that you trip your breaker just turning the unit on. That's the bearing slowing down on the actual little fan inside the motor right there. So what will happen a lot of the times is that you'll be running it on a circuit that is a 15 amp like it says it's rated for, but it'll trip it consistently if you so much as have two lights on, barely using 1 amp out of that whole circuit. It can pretty much take all 15 and just trip your breaker like that. So the whole shop ended up getting an upgrade from a 15 amp breaker to a 20 amp breaker pretty much because of this guy right here. And that's not a bad idea in general. Pretty much all of my tools say that they're rated for 15, but a lot of them when they peak, either when you take a heavy draw from a chop saw cutting through a heavy piece of wood, or just some kind of more aggressive hardwood or something like that, that draw on the amperage will actually cause a lot of breakers to trip, because it's usually pretty close to 15 for a lot of this equipment to be more enthusiast grade. Because you can get a lot cheaper stuff that says 15 but never goes near it on the amperage scale. But a lot of the stuff I've got, I check around and I make sure that if it is 15 and I can use it through the majority of my house, it's still pretty much right at 15 amps or just below it. So that way I'm getting the best performance for a lot of my tools, but I can still use any basic 110 hookup, and I don't have to hook it over to 220 or even go near single phase or anything at all like that for a lot of these. And that was another thing that kind of sold me on looking around for these. Like I said, I lucked out on this being free, but when I was looking around at a lot of jet brands and a lot of the other things, is I had to pretty much go right into single phase, or I had to at least be at 220 for most any of them that I was looking at for what I wanted to do with it. And this is kind of that borderline. You can get 5 amps or 5 horsepower up to 8 horsepower, pretty quick and available. Grizzly brand, Jet brand. There's some Delta brands and some different ones out there as well. They boast a lot more power, but unless I'm absolutely running like 2 huge either drum sanders or some kind of industrial planer or joiner of some kind that's going to be taking in large chunks of wood chips, I don't necessarily need anything that large. So for me, by and large, being more of an enthusiast or kind of an intermediate, I'm not full on 100% woodworker, and I'm not somebody that's just barely dabbling or just doing basic home repair. This is a bit more of that in between for me, and still being very budget friendly. This thing has taken a few nails and a few screws going through the motor. Not suggested, but by accident. Cleaning up the shop, didn't realize when I was taking apart some pallets I had missed a few of the nails, and you can hear it rattle through, and it is absolutely makes your heart sink. But the blade that's used in here, the little turbine in there, is metal, so it can take it. I just wouldn't excessively suck up an entire pile of screws or nails, because it will effectively do some damage. But the other thing that's very terrifying about it is it throws it in that bag, and at the speed it throws it at, the nail, 2 of them went in, and one came right out, the other one sat down in the dirt and dust at the bottom, luckily. But the other one came out with some speed, and it went right through the side of that bag, and it wasn't quite a nail gun coming out, but it was a flying nail hitting the wall hard enough to make a ding in the wall. So keep that in mind. It is vicious in that regard, so just when you are sucking up material and kind of going around, it's not actually good for the motor, but also that thing does come out there pretty quick. Let's go over a few things here real quick. So this is a Central Machinery 2 horsepower dust collector. 4.5 star rating, pretty much anywhere you look to buy it. It is a great unit. A lot of people have had it, and they haven't really changed the design whatsoever, and I kind of like that. It's reliable in that regard. There isn't consistent upgrades, but I'm not also worried about more and more plastic getting added to this, and that also makes this review for you guys very reliable in the regards to where, even though this is 2 years old, you'll know that this is pretty much the same one on the floor that you can go purchase today. No extra hose. Make sure you have to get the accessory kit for that, at least when this one was purchased. I don't know if that's changed exactly. So far as I've seen on their website and looking around, you will need to purchase an additional hose, $15 to $20 from what comes with the kit, which is just that 5-inch to connect these two here. I put this in this configuration so that way it gives you the best suction and with no reduction in anything kind of going through and hitting odd in that kind of pseudo 90 angle that they originally had for its setup. And it shortened my footprint greatly, and the thing mounts up amazing. If you do plan on changing this around, the arm that hooks onto this motor here can be rotated. Just keep in mind that you have to take off, let's see, 12 bolts that you will unscrew all the way around the unit, and then that comes off. The turbine itself on the inside there, you will take out a single bolt in the center of it and then slide that all the way out. You will be met with an additional, I think, like 8 or 10 bolts on the other side. That basically takes that whole shroud housing off and then exposes and has it to where you can actually rotate the bracket to mount that one direction or the other to change out where the port shoots out the dust. So I had to rotate it to be able to mount it up the way I have it so that the bag would be on that side. Otherwise, originally I was going to try to put the bag against the wall and mount out this way. And when I rotated it back and forth, I was like, no. So in order for this to match up with my sealing, I had to take that apart. But you don't have to break any seals or anything like that. It's just a rubber gasket on the inside. So when you take it apart, just clean up the gasket as you're reassembling it so that way it creates proper suction. Otherwise you will lose suction through the sides wherever dirt, debris, or if you get a tear on that gasket while taking it apart. So just keep that in mind. So the main thing is why you probably clicked on this video. Let's go over real quick. So like I said, I've had this for 2 years. So you're wondering for how long can this unit last, being a bit more in the middle to cheaper end of the spectrum for dust collectors in general. I would say that this thing is pretty well bulletproof for the most part. I've seen some horror videos of people just absolutely sucking out broken glass and all sorts of stuff with this. They destroy the hose, and depending on what bag they have to capture all of that random debris, it will usually explode out the other end, and that becomes kind of its own video. A lot of those did get kind of taken down off of YouTube because they didn't want to really like push more views into potentially encouraging danger to people. So a couple of those videos have been taken down, but feel free to look around. You can see there are a couple individuals that had a bit of an odd idea to just kind of see if they can, stress test or torture test these units to see how well they last and if they will work good. The motor itself is bulletproof. The things I've seen that thing go through on the internet, and just in my own personal opinion, I did drop that trying to put it up on myself until I asked my brother for help. So that thing has landed about 8-9 feet the way I had it originally mounted up, standing on top of the table. I'm just under 6 foot, so me on top of that table having to reach up like this and then just accidentally having to let go of it because the angle I was at and trying to put it up there, that thing just rolled backwards. Luckily it didn't hit me at all, and it's pretty darn heavy. I think it's at least well over 50 pounds, we'll put it that way. Not exactly sure on that one, but it's heavy, and especially when you get it above your head, it's heavy. Trying to mount it up, that's where I got in trouble with it. So that has taken 2 tumbles until I got let go of my stubbornness and called my brother. I was like, hey, could you come over and help me with this for a second? I'm either gonna hurt myself or something in the shop. But it still runs fine. It never gave me a slight hiccup or anything whatsoever. It just kept taking the punches. The connections under here that you can see, you can block off one end or the other. That works just fine. I've had no issues with it. At first, when I was using it on a really cold day, some of the plastic had shrunk on one side, so it didn't want to really like hold up with the suction. So what I ended up doing was just running a little screw, just a little self tapper that we'd use for like any kind of tin work or anything having to work with tinning or duct work. One of those little self tapper screws, I just ran that through the side. Stays on there perfect. I can take that screw out. It doesn't compromise anything, and it works just great. So that's what I have currently holding up that side. And I mainly left this on instead of just reducing it down to nothing, because that's 5 inches versus the hose itself is 4. So just kind of keep that in mind too for any of the modifications or change arounds. And you can actually buy for this one in particular an upgrade to the turbine in here. So the turbine as it sits, you have an opening about yay big, and the turbine sits in just a little bit smaller than that. Makes it easy for taking it in and out and changing things around. So you can actually purchase a larger, I can't remember exactly dimensions, I think it's like, this is either an 8-inch and you can get like a 10-inch or something like that. It's like a couple inches basically But when you put that on a larger diameter for that turbine, it will increase the suction on this exponentially. That part I also kind of left out because it ran great, and I think it was like an additional 50 to 70 bucks to buy that depending on who I went through. All the same part, just depends on who you get it from. Either Amazon has a couple up there for a bit until they become unavailable, or it's on eBay and then you're just waiting for a slow boat from China to get here, so that maybe in the next month to 2 months you can have that product you purchased, or you end up with a refund on your credit card and no correlation knowing why. That's another reason I'm a little, I like Harbor Freight products, but the aftermarket for some of these in particular is kind of hit or miss. So either you will for a while find it on Amazon, or it'll end up being on eBay that you find the component, and it's just a question of what time you're willing to wait and if it will actually arrive or not. So as you can tell, I'm a bit excited, a little all over the place, and I apologize for that. The unit in question is a great one, definitely worth purchasing. And you know the generalized stats over it. If you're looking at a 2-year review on it, you've probably already looked at the 1 year, you've probably looked at an unboxing of it, you've looked at the box in front of yourself questioning, is this worth the longevity and purchase of it? So as for my opinion of it, there's a lot of upgrades and a lot of things that I could still do to this and breathe a lot more life into it. And I can't see anything really that would fail on it out of the box in production or anything else. This is a very simplistic design. It works great. Any part of it you can swap around. Even if you just end up with the motor by itself, that 2 horsepower motor is very strong and it can do most anything you want. Now if you're in a large industrial kind of setup and you're wanting to work with a whole team of people all working in one wood shop, if you were to be like either a high school setup or even a college setup where you have multiple tools going on for wood shop or something like that, you'd probably be pushing the limits of this guy, running multiple drill presses, multiple table saws, multiple chop saws, so on and so forth, having like at least 5, if not 8 people all working at once. This might struggle just a teensy-wincy bit kind of thing. Otherwise, if you're just a single person or even a couple people working in an environment where you're working with 1 to 2 tools simultaneously or by itself, this unit will have no hiccups, no hitches, no problems. A couple blast gates open, it works great. If you were to push it, what I've read and seen a lot of it, and I've kind of played around with in a few configurations, I could see it dropping over a great distance. So if you're extending one line well over 20 feet to one side of a shop and another end on another 20 feet in the other direction, it would be fine-ish. But if you were to do that along with a couple other setups, even if they're closer, you would notice, of course, the closer ones getting a lot better suction, no issues, no backups, no hitches and giddy up kind of deal, versus the 2 on the outer laying ones. You would start to notice in like table saw situations, you would kind of hear a little bit more grumbling noises, chunks of wood kind of knocking around in them. So just kind of keep that in mind. It all depends on your purpose of it. If you are purchasing this for a larger kind of industrial setup, this probably wouldn't be the first thing you would look at. If it was to be something to get you by until you got a larger, more industrial grade for, like I said, a lot more people, then yes, this would do good until you kind of hit the end of that point where you're like, all right, we need to upgrade. It would still be a great unit for single use or just setting up on a couple stations type deal. That'd be awesome. This would do amazing in that instance. But as far as practical applications, any home enthusiast woodworker would love to have this, and it would work phenomenal for them. The kits are pretty cheap. You're still well under the $400 and $500 mark, even buying the $65 kit and spending the $210 on it. You're still under $300 enough to make it worthwhile. So as far as budget is concerned, it's amazing. It'll do everything you want for it. Bang for the buck, essentially. I would purchase this one 100%. I'd have no qualms with it. Of course, having a lot more hands-on and 2 years experience kind of playing around with it and using a whole bunch with my planer and just general shop cleanup, I could attach to any of my tools and feel perfectly fine that it will do the job just right, if not better. The one thing I will look at purchasing here in the near future, hopefully, is a splitter attachment. So on the end of the hose, you can actually hook it on there and it kind of almost looks like a cow udder, where it would have like 4 ports coming off of it. And each one of those ports either being a differing size, or it would be one of those setups where it would have 4 of the same size. So that way I could run them down and have it split down into smaller ports in those longer hoses, so I'm not purchasing a large hose, running that all the way through my shop and then reducing at the end of that. I could already have it reduced over here and then purchase a smaller hose and run it through smaller, tighter crevices to my bandsaw and have one going over to my chop saw permanently. That way, whenever I'm working in the shop, I just put in some earbuds or some ear protection, fire that guy up, and just immediately get to work and just reduce my entire overall air debris greatly. I have a few different little things, you know, opening doors, opening windows, but otherwise I need to set up my fan with a filter on it. One of the first main kind of like air purifier setups that you can get that isn't going to absolutely destroy an air purifier, isn't going to absolutely kill the bank to have, as far as some of the dust collections you can get for just ambient air cleaning for dirt and debris and dust. Some of those setups that will run just to purify the air are nice, and I would eventually like to get one, but the most cheap budget one I was looking at is a Wen product. Love Wen, no problems there, but it would run me about at least $130 to $160 for just a normal basic one that I could hang up in the rafters to catch ambient dust, especially in the wintertime when I can't open a window unless I want to sacrifice heat and, you know, a proper ambient temperature that would be more livable and enjoyable to work in, so that way I can have better air purity. So kind of a few things to keep in mind there. You can just run this in the corner if you wanted to. It does create enough suction that in a small space like this 200 square foot shop, it can create enough movement that I can quickly see if I stir up a bunch of dust cleaning in here and turn that on, just leave it in the corner, it'll almost create a mild pull enough to actually pull that ambient dust and debris out of the air pretty quickly. Within about 5 to 10 minutes, the shop's pretty well clear and looking like it does now, versus when it's just an absolute dust cloud and I can't see anything. As far as everything else that you would be wondering about for packaging and what have you, I, like I said, was not the original owner, so I can see, just like you, on any unboxing, any of the additional questions you may have would be better answered in those related videos, as far as anything that you would see directly coming out of the box versus the configuration I currently have it in. The configuration I had it in, or have it in right now, I really like. I would highly suggest it. There is a variety of modifications you can do to it, and to connect these two, all I did was I used the actual duct tape. Not duct tape itself as a name brand, but the aluminum tape that you would use for ducting and for any kind of aluminum HVAC kind of applications. I use that tape. Very strong. The one that I use, I think, has a fiberglass reinforcement going through it. I wrapped that quite a few times around the centerpiece here, connecting the two, and I have had zero leaks or issues with it since I mounted it up there a year plus now. And no issues. I pretty much, me and my brother mounted this up. I kept going with cleaning up and rebuilding and creating the interior of this whole wood shop, and using that all along the way, using it a whole bunch with my planer, and I've had zero leaks or issues with it. I've just had to change the bag numerous times now. But hopefully this has given you a few little insights and some different ideas and some insights into if this is a good product after 2 years. It's kind of a little bit all around there, ideas and different things that I've seen with it. If I was to go back again and either get it for free or purchase one without any kind of freeness to it, and I was to just go and buy it myself, I believe out of everything that was available at the time and available now, I would still go and purchase this. I feel 100% that this is the dust collector for most general purpose people and anyone that's on a more budget. A lot of people have a Harbor Freight nearby or can get to one, or they do not mind having one shipped to them from any other reputable site that they trust. This is still a good product to go with. And there is a few things that have popped up. I think Wen might have one of these out now, and a couple other brands I've seen that are just basic dust collectors. I don't have a review on those or any kind of inkling of how they work in comparison to this one. This has been my primary one that I've used, so just kind of being upfront about that one. It's a little biased in that regard, but for everything that I've put this thing through, all the different types of hardwoods and just random pallet wood and everything else that has done pretty much every single project ever since I've gotten this planer, and I'd use it every video pretty much. Whether you see it or not, that thing's getting used. It has just taken everything out of that and put it right in that bag and has caused me no issues, and I have minimal to no dust coming out of that filter up top. I will say, if you do use this heavily, I would do every few weeks. Otherwise, if you use it intermittently, I'd do at least once a month, taking that filter out, banging it out into a trash can, and using a vacuum and just kind of sucking it out and cleaning that inside out, so that way you get any little finite dust to get it to actually better filter, and that'll create a greater suction. And if you maintain that kind of routine of cleaning up, making sure all your connections are properly tight, making sure that that's clean at least once a month, this unit will last you for Lord knows how long. I don't know. I don't know if I can kill this thing. I've seen them out in the rain a few times on YouTube. There's a few people that have literally just hooked them up. They're rusted. They look horrible on the side of their shop because they just didn't want to deal with the noise. They didn't want to deal with all the extra hosing and stuff. And they just let it bake in the sun, and they let it just freeze in the wintertime, and they turn it on and it always runs. I have this permanently turned on, and I just plug it in because it's up too far for me to actually get to, and the switch is now on the back side. Another side note for you, so I just plug it in, no issues there, just doing a plug and play, literally. I plug it in, as you heard, it turns on, I use it, and then as soon as I'm done, I unplug it. I do eventually want to just hook up a little switch of some kind. You would leave that consistently turned on, and then it would just be at the outlet, but the outlet's literally right here. So in that instance, why would I necessarily need a switch if I could just plug and unplug it? But eventually I might end up still getting a switch just to have one. And I don't know, I'm a guy, I like having useless tools for no reason as well as having useful tools. But all that to say, thank you all so very much for listening to my thoughts and opinions after 2 years of living with the 2 horsepower, 70-gallon dust collector from Harbor Freight. It's been a rant, it's been kind of a mental space. I apologize for that kind of going a little longer in certain regards than I would hope. But hopefully this has been helpful to you in one way or another. This is my uses and purposes for having this dust collector, my enjoyments of it. I have no real cons to say about it. My only cons with it would be it keeps tempting me to put more money into it to upgrade it for the sake of upgrading it. It doesn't really need it for any of my applications. There's zero upgrade needed for this dust collector, but it kind of just still begs me to upgrade it and make it better, but that's also partly my personality, you could say. Thank you all again. Hopefully you liked the video. If you did, hit the thumbs up button. If you didn't, hit the thumbs down. I'm more than happy to get an honest opinion one way or another. If you liked the video and want to leave your impression of it, feel free to leave a comment below. If you didn't, let me know your thoughts below as well. Perfectly fine and open to any comments or anything, wanting to have a conversation or discussion on any parts, benefits, or any worries you might have about the unit that I might be able to give some insight into. Other than that, be sure to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. It helps me out greatly. Gives you the ability to look at any other future content that I have on my channel and see anything else that you feel like popping up and looking through or viewing again. Hit the notification bell as well if you'd like to. Gives you the ability to get notifications each and every time that I upload. And thank you all so very much for reviewing and taking your time out of your busy day. So, thank you again. Have yourself a good one.